Fury relies on his size and intimidation, but Usyk does not scare easily. The way he stared down Fury at the Chisora fight told us that. Usyk was too good for Joshua, who improved considerably in the second fight. Joshua is a decent attacking fighter too, better than Fury on the front foot. Fury is essentially a boxer fighter. He rarely comes forward until he has to. Speed is the issue. Usyk is not only a southpaw who moves brilliantly and takes a shot, he has epic speed. I think this is a much tougher fight for Fury than he thinks it is, and like Joshua, he could be in for a rude awakening. End quote. Once again, I think what Shane McGuigan says here is very interesting, and he makes some very valid points. He talks about Usyk not scaring easily, and this evidence of this being when he stared down Fury after the Chisora trilogy fight. And I think that's a very interesting point, because that's how I perceived it as well. Because I watched that the highlights of his little meeting with Usyk after the Chisora fight, and I found that to be more interesting than the Chisora fight itself, because I was looking at Tyson Fury and how he was behaving in front of Usyk. Because when you consider the situation, the spotlight was very much on Tyson Fury. He had the mic, it was his show, he just won. Everyone wanted to see what he had to say to Usyk. And he was screaming and shouting all these obscene things in Usyk's face. And Usyk was just there, like a robot, like a machine, just staring back at him, not giving him any kind of response, barely blinking. And you just saw Tyson Fury just carry on. Just his phrases and the words he was using just getting progressively more silly and obscene, and still wasn't getting that reaction. He still wasn't getting a bite from Oleksandr Usyk. And I could be completely wrong, but the way I perceived it was somewhat effective at unsettling Fury, because there was this atmosphere, this awkwardness that Tyson Fury then tried to diffuse by directing his attention to Joe Joyce, who then stepped up to the ring. And it was a little bit of a relief for Tyson Fury, because as I say, he diffused some of that awkwardness, and he actually had a dance partner a verbal dance partner to have some back and forth with. Whereas against Oleksandr Usyk was just still, just looking at him with those crazy eyes he has, not giving him any kind of reaction. I feel like it's an interesting dynamic, because I don't think anyone's really tried to approach Fury like that. I feel like Dillian Whyte, he tried to go for the silent treatment, where he wasn't turning up for media until fight week, really wasn't giving Tyson Fury anything to work with. But that was different, because Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte were very familiar with each other. These guys had sparred dozens and dozens of rounds. So Tyson Fury knew who Dillian Whyte is, or he knows who Dillian Whyte is. He knew what Dillian Whyte brought to the table from that familiarity. So when Whyte's giving him the silent treatment, it doesn't really mean much, doesn't amount to much. But against Oleksandr Usyk, a fighter who you'd imagine that Fury doesn't know so well, this could potentially be quite interesting. And that was definitely something that really piqued my interest. I almost made a video about it, but I was too busy at the time. Definitely thought it was an interesting dynamic, and I thought Tyson Fury was somewhat unsettled by Usyk's reaction, or lack thereof. It doesn't necessarily mean that it would result in Tyson Fury losing to Oleksandr Usyk, but I definitely think it's going to be an interesting situation, an interesting dynamic that I don't think we've ever seen Tyson Fury have to deal with before. And talking about dynamics, Shane McGuigan also talks about stylistic dynamics, in the fact that he recognises Joshua as being a decent attacking fighter and actually better than Tyson Fury on the front foot. And now this is something that I feel has been overlooked, because especially now, but even over the years, many people see Tyson Fury as a superior fighter, plain and simple, to Anthony Joshua. And I can't hold that against anyone, because I think right now the smart money would be on Tyson Fury to beat Anthony Joshua. But just because Tyson Fury may beat Joshua and prove himself to be superior if they were to ever step in the ring, it doesn't necessarily mean that every aspect of Tyson Fury's game is superior to every aspect of Anthony Joshua's game. For my money, and I think many objective observers would also agree and point this out, Joshua has some formidable strengths and some formidable tools that Tyson Fury doesn't necessarily have. The first example that comes to mind is Joshua's ability to really shorten up his shots, single shots and in combination up close and mid-range. You know, that close to mid-range kind of inside range. Tyson Fury, he can do it somewhat well, but in comparison to Anthony Joshua, in my opinion, it's night and day. Joshua really is a ferocious fighter up close with the hooksy uppercuts, the short shots, especially in combination, as I say, the explosiveness he has with it, the accuracy, but also how he sets those shots up, the way he uses hooks to set up uppercuts and vice versa, the way he uses one arm to pin your guard while he lands an uppercut with the other one. We've seen that over his career. I think Joshua is quite a natural fighter in the pocket. But we've seen him kind of deviate from that in recent years, mostly following the Andy Ruiz fight, because he went in for the finish. He looked to apply those inside fighting skills and came unstuck. The rest is history. He's been on the rebuilding process ever since. And even more so now that he's lost to Oleksandr Usyk. But I feel like people have downplayed this and they see Fury as, oh, he's better than these guys. And therefore, he automatically has greater strengths than they have in the same department, if that makes sense. But that's not the case. I certainly don't see that as being the case. I see Fury as, he has some strengths that Joshua doesn't have, but then Joshua has some strengths that Fury doesn't have. And therefore, a fight against Fury, a fight between Fury and Oleksandr Usyk, in my opinion, it's still up in the air. I think that's still a very interesting fight. And I feel like the public perception especially has changed because, or particularly since Tyson Fury announced and had the fight against Derek Chisora. Obviously, that was a terrible, dreadful fight. Had really no business happening for the WBC title and on pay-per-view. And a lot of people after that were left with a bad taste in their mouths. And some people have gone as far as losing their patience with Tyson Fury and really washing their hands of him. And since then, they've seemed to side with Usyk a bit more. And now I'd say still take these people's opinions with a pinch of salt because they clearly base their predictions on their perception of a fighter from an emotional perspective, like a fighter's personality. Whereas I'm basing it off of part of their personality, but objectively on their styles. And for me, stylistically, Usyk could potentially be all wrong for Tyson Fury. But just going back to my initial point, we've started to see a bit of a change in the in people's perspective of how this fight goes down. And I think a lot of it does come from the fact that some people are starting to see, they're starting to want to see Tyson Fury lose, which, look, that's your prerogative, but I'm always going to view the fight objectively. And I remember in the lead up, or no, just after the first fight between Joshua and Usyk, I was on a live with Hatman and I said that, in my opinion, if Usyk can beat Joshua, that would give me more confidence that he beats Fury and Wilder. Just because from a stylistic point of view, I thought that Joshua's skills and Joshua's his athletic setup, his style would allow him to keep up with Oleksandr Usyk. But then we saw in the two fights, the speed, the coordination, the dexterity, the agility, the IQ, the technique, just the overall boxing game of Usyk was too much for Joshua. And I think, many people have asked my opinion on this fight. I think that could potentially be the case against Fury as well. Because yes, Fury is bigger than Joshua, longer reach, a bit slicker, a bit more slippery. But for my money, Fury isn't as well coordinated as Joshua, even though he's a little bit slicker. Fury, potentially his kryptonite could be a smaller fighter. And now people are going to, some stroppy halfwits will probably say, oh, outmatch, you just want to see Fury lose. You want to see him be beaten. Newsflash, people, I've never picked against Fury. The only time you could maybe say I picked against him was in the first Wilder fight where I predicted it would be a draw. And what was it? A draw. Other than that, I've picked Fury. But when you also factor in that Fury said out of his own mouth that the Steve Cunningham fight was the hardest fight of his career, that's very telling, because Steve Cunningham was also probably the smallest opponent in Tyson Fury's entire pro career. And in my opinion, Oleksandr Usyk is a much more formidable, smaller fighter than Steve Cunningham. So I think it's very interesting. But then a final point that Shane McGuigan talks about is, I think, and this is his quote, I think this is a much tougher fight for Fury than he thinks it is. And now that's an interesting point, because I feel like that's kind of sums Tyson Fury up in a nutshell. My observation of Tyson Fury over the years is that he, some fighters fight to the level of their opposition. That may be true for Tyson Fury. But I think with Tyson Fury, he fights to the level of his perception of the opposition, where it really doesn't matter too much in terms of what you bring to the table. It's what Tyson Fury largely perceives you as. Does he perceive you as an easy touch, or does he perceive you as a threat? Tyson Fury fluctuates quite a lot in his performances and his attitude and just his general mindset. He's a very erratic person. It's hard to pin him down because there's no clear pattern to Tyson Fury a lot of the time. And so how does he perceive Oleksandr Usyk, I think, is going to be a key. Because if he actually genuinely believes Oleksandr Usyk is a blown-up middleweight who's only beaten a bodybuilder and had a tough fight against Chisora, which he should have lost, which is nonsense. But if Fury perceives Usyk as being that, I think that rude awakening would be, it'd be the rudest awakening. But if he genuinely holds Oleksandr Usyk in high regard and he prepares accordingly, it could make the fight a lot more manageable. Although I do think that Fury, even on his day, still struggles with Oleksandr Usyk. Just my opinion. Feel free to leave yours down below. I just think if you put I'm not going to say the word, but if you put some kind of projectile device to my head and I had to make a prediction right now, I think I'm going with Usyk, like 51-49, not by much, and I could change my mind, but I just see Usyk is having a really good chance of beating Fury right now from a stylistic point of view, but also that little interaction they had after the Chisora fight and the way I saw Fury react. I think Usyk has a good chance. But look, this is all speculation right now. Let's just hope first and foremost that the fight gets announced sometime soon. I don't want to see this fight being announced any later than March. We need it in the first couple of months of 2023. We are owed it as boxing fans. So for now, it's just discussion. But nevertheless, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree with my take? Do you agree with the take of Shane McGuigan? Leave it down there and I'll get back to you. But for now, thanks for listening and I'll catch you in the next video.